Welcome to the Your Money Counts podcast, brought to you by Marquette Savings Bank. I'm Jenna. I will be your host for today's episode. In today's episode, we're continuing our fraud series, and we're going to be talking more about ransomware and phishing. So before we dive into this episode, we're going to do our Get to Know Your Banker segment. So if you could introduce yourself and tell us what your dream car is. Let's go with that.
I'm Scott Schaefer. I'm Assistant Vice President at Marquette and Information Security Manager. To be honest with you, I'm not a huge car guy.
You got to have one.
But I'm a Jeep guy. I have a Jeep now. They have a 2021 Jeep Trackhawk, one of the fastest SUVs.
Of course.
0 to 60 in like 3.2 seconds. But they start out at like 90,000. So I figure that would be at least somewhat a dream car, not a typical sports car. But.
Yeah, no, not at all. I have to say, I don't know why I'm a fan of the Mini Cooper convertibles. I don't know. They're my vibe. So we're going to get into some questions about ransomware and phishing, and it's not fishing at the lake. It's spelled with a PH, so it's a different kind of phishing. So I know that everybody out there has probably heard the term ransomware, but what exactly does that mean? Can you tell us what it means?
Ransomware is a malicious pay code sent from a bad actor or a hacker that is intended to encrypt data or a machine to become unusable for the victim. And then the hacker will use that to extort the victim for money.
So it's like a virus.
Correct. It can come in different forms, phishing links. It can come through worms, download attachments. It's basically, in layman terms, it locks the machine down to become unusable. And then what this does is they want a ransom to give them their information or machine back. And we have to remember that it's always just not data. Some of this stuff is life-threatening. We've seen it happen in hospitals where they've locked down patients' records. We've seen it happen with, they were controlling street lights in a city.
Oh, wow.
And I know I just read of one not too long ago that they were actually not allowing dispatch to reach out to ambulances.
Oh, wow. So this is very dangerous stuff.
Very much. Very much.
Dangerous. And it's kind of interesting that it has very non-dangerous type vocabulary, phishing and worms, and it makes you think you're going to a lake, but this is serious stuff. So why should a consumer or small business owner need to be concerned with it? It sounds like it can really get into, their systems and mess with everything.
For consumers, it's a risk because they would lose their machine. They most likely would have to get it wiped, not always, but possibly, and they would lose all their information they have on there. That would include family photos, tax documents if you have them on there, any kind of information that you have at all. And even more so of a risk, which are becoming more and more dominant, is going after small businesses.
Right.
Small businesses' risk is it could lose their business. Even if they lose their data for as simple as a day, they lose revenue for that day.
Right.
You also have the reputation risk that will they lose customers over this because, they lose faith in that business.
Right. It could trip them up for a day, and then that could domino effect into, weeks, months, and even years, and then boom, business is closed.
Right. And just on the outside looking in, and if the customer sees this and they're saying, what's going on here? I don't want my information with this company. They may choose to leave even though their information wasn't at risk.
And then they lose their business entirely.
Yeah.
Wow. So if someone is targeted, what should they do?
If they are targeted and a victim, the first thing you have to do is completely unplug your machine off the network and the computer. Doing so stops it from spreading across the network and infecting any other machines. You also then want to unplug or disconnect any connected hardware you have associated with it, like including external hard drives, cameras, phones. Another thing people forget to do as a good step is I try to tell people is take a picture of the ransomware note in case it goes away or it gets wiped or something happens. For a police case, this could be very helpful if it does do enough damage that a police case is opened. And then you obviously want to contact your IT department or a specialist that would know what they're doing.
So, Scott, I've heard you mention the term machines.
A machine, I guess, is a more general term. I guess I should have meant your PC or your computer, your laptop, your desktop, anything like that.
So we talked about some things you should do. What are some things you should not do?
The first thing is panic. I know it's a lot easier said than done. Obviously, when you see a note like your files are encrypted, you must pay us $1,000 to get it back, you're going to panic.
Right.
But again, you obviously don't want to leave your machine plugged in. That's the first thing you have to remember is to unplug your machine. The hot topic right now is the FBI and a lot of the experts still say and always began saying, do not pay the ransom.
Okay.
By paying the ransom, it affects a couple things. Number one, you're out the money and you're not guaranteed to get that information back. It has happened where people have paid a ransom and they've just gone on their way.
Right.
The other is like FBI states, paying the ransom helps them.
Seems like it'll help them fund the next scam.
Well, help them fund the next scam, as well as it encourages them to go after other victims because it worked in the first time. So FBI, as far as that's what I'm going off of. Like I said, there have been, we've seen in the news, bigger companies pay the ransom for their information. They have gotten it back in cases. Some have not gotten it back in cases. So it's really a coin flip. But as of the FBI, they do not recommend to pay it.
Yeah, and what the FBI says probably should do, right?
Right.
So we've been hearing this word ransomware a lot in this conversation. So what is it about ransomware that seems to be an ongoing trend? Why is it such a hot topic right now?
Ransomware's been around for a little while, but it's really picked up recently.
Okay.
One of that thing is because, like we just talked about, is people are paying the ransom. It's encouraging them to go after more. They're going after. It started with the consumer. It's moving more towards businesses because they'd rather go after the big fish than a few $100s. They can get tens of thousands of dollars from a business. So that's why it's really picked up, because they've been able to get inside of these businesses. But they still start at consumers. So I'm not saying not to be aware as a consumer. The other thing is obviously with the pandemic going on.
Yes.
They've taken big advantage of the pandemic. I read the other day from the FBI again that it was up 300% from last year.
Wow.
All through the pandemic. A lot of them focusing on scams and stuff affecting, COVID shots, the World Health Organization, people just believing it because they want the information. They didn't know what was going on in the world. They're trying to figure it out.
Right.
And they took full-blown advantage of that and really ran with it. And I think that's why we've really seen it skyrocket.
Wow.
And simply because it's working.
Yeah. And, everybody's, sitting at home trying to, gather what information they can throughout the pandemic. And you don't know what's coming from a credible news source and what's not. So it seems like it's easier to fall victim to, all of this at the time right now.
Right.
So that makes it extra scary.
Exactly. And tying in with the pandemic, with so many people working from home, it kind of threw businesses, to the lion's den. You have to learn how to do this quickly. So they did what they could to have it work, and maybe they left some holes open that they should have shut down,
right,
or whatnot from there. But they've definitely jumped on that opportunity.
Yeah, and they just kind of got in there probably before the businesses knew how to protect themselves, because at the beginning we didn't know how long this was going to last, and then it just kind of kept going and going. Right. So wow. So what can you do to help yourself prevent a ransomware attack or to be a target of ransomware?
The first and foremost would be what we call cyber hygiene.
That's an interesting term.
Basically, it's just, for lack of a better word, to use your common sense.
Yeah.
When a lot of these ransomwares are delivered through phishing links, through other attempts of that kind of social engineering. So you really want to take your time. Don't click on links. Don't go. Well, I shouldn't say don't click on any links, but don't click on any links you're not sure of.
Right.
Don't go to random websites. Don't download random attachments. You just have to really use your know-how and take your time and review things before you do anything.
Right, and be careful with your Google searches, because not every link of a website is going to be legitimate.
Right, and that was one of the biggest things with ransomware, was so many different health organizations were being copycatted to fake websites, and they were getting there and getting information. People were logging in with their socials to check their COVID records and everything else, and it kind of flew from there. So that would be the first. The second would be obviously to run security on your computer, anti-malware, antivirus. There's no one thing that can stop. We like to say defense in depth, meaning you have multiple layers to protection. So you have backup. If one fails, hopefully another one picks it up. So that would be another one.
So essentially creating a cyber football team for yourself.
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. You want to start with your line.
We've heard the terms phishing, vishing, smishing, all the ishings. So are they all the same? Are all three of those the same?
No, they're not the same at all, but they are the same technique, I guess I would say.
Okay.
Phishing would be, as we already talked about a little bit, a email that's pretending to be someone else, usually that they can trust, or else it's just a random email with a bad link or a bad attachment in it, hoping that they get this person to click that link and give out information or personal information or documents or whatever it may be. Phishing is more of a broadcast, just like it sounds. They might send it to 1,000 people. If they only get 5 people to respond, that's still a win for them. So that would be phishing. Vishing is the same way, but through voice. So they would call you pretending to be someone else, usually a bank representative, a doctor's office, just to name a couple,
right.
Just to get you to trust them, and then they would try to phish information out of you over the phone. And then finally would be smishing, which is SMS, where they would send you a text with that information, hoping you follow a website to a bad website,
right?
Or click a link, or even just reply with that same type of information they wanted.
Right. Yeah. I think we've all at this point gotten a text message on our phones from 825-6870, and then it's like all bunch of at symbols,
right.
and
Yep.
and you don't want to click on those ones, especially, I'm assuming. So what can you do to protect yourself from falling for any of those? I know we talked about it a little bit before with, phishing, but is there anything different between the vishing and the smishing that you would have to do to protect yourself from all of them?
Really, it's just like, if we go back to that cyber hygiene, you really just have to take your time and review things. Does this make sense to you? Would someone like this, would a bank be calling me, asking me for my account number? No.
No.
Would, my doctors be calling me, asking me for my full Social Security? No. So you just have to really take your time, make sure it makes sense. A big tactic they use that gets a lot of people is what we call scareware, where they send you an email and they try to rush you into without thinking, portraying to be the FBI, portraying to be a police station. IRS is a big one.
Yeah.
If you didn't pay your taxes this month, if you don't respond to this within 24 hours, there will be a subpoena for your arrest. They try to make you, before you have time to ask someone else, before you have time to react, they want you just to react for them instead of follow up and figure out what's going on here.
Right. And they could even be pretending to be someone that if someone else's, a loved one, family member, or friend's email gets hacked. They could be trying to be them, or, they could latch onto it and, what could they be doing? They could even be changing one letter and you don't notice it because, you're just used to looking at their email address and you just read it as you always do. But it could be somebody else. Right.
And I always say, if it came from, say my mom or something, or my wife, and it was random out of the blue, and it was just had a link in it and I didn't expect anything and the link looked weird, obviously send them a text first or give them a call. Say, hey, did you send this to me? And then go from there. Just don't randomly, just because, like you said, just because it's a friend or a family member, assume it's safe, because it's not always.
So now you mentioned cyber hygiene. Now, what would be falling under that category? Would it be creating strong passwords for yourself? We mentioned lining up the different types of security to catch if one, does fall. So, going back to passwords, I know a lot of people have the tendency to use the same one for all of their things, and I'm assuming you don't recommend that.
No, not at all.
So what would be an example of a strong password?
A strong password, again, yes, that does tie in right with cyber hygiene. That's, again, another defense in depth, another layer of protection for yourself. Remember, with the cyber hygiene, you have to remember when reviewing these types of things, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. And that's another thing a lot of people fall for. But again, going back to the passwords are very important. Like you already mentioned, do not recycle passwords. That's a very common mistake people do. That way, if they get one password, they can just go across your whole network, your online banking, your email, your doctor's office, go from there. So you want to change your passwords. Don't have the same. There's great password managers out there that you can look up that store passwords for you, so you don't have to remember them all.
Okay.
You just have to remember the one to get in there.
Now, would there be apps out there that would do the same, that are safe to download?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I would do your research. Maybe ask an expert. I don't want to specifically name any
Right.
certain companies or anything, but I mean, there's definitely some great apps and software pieces out there for this. And then when creating this password, and those apps also help create passwords, they'll auto-generate passwords for you. So that's helpful for some that can't think of passwords.
Yeah, well, I'm one of those. So yeah, I'll definitely be utilizing that. And then also no PIN codes that are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 0, 0.
Right. Nothing. A strong password, you want to, even if they recommend, say, or 4 for pins, if they recommend 4-digit pin, 6 digits is okay. Just like 8 characters, 12 digits is okay.
Right.
You want to use all 4 character sets. That would be uppercase, lowercase, special character, and number. This will help any kind of password cracking. It breaks that up. You don't want to use any dictionary words.
Okay.
You want to break that up with changing a letter to a number or a symbol or something like that. The best piece of advice I could use is make a phrase from a password.
Okay.
And kind of break that down, something you can remember.
That's
you just
good
want
to
to make
know.
it strong as possible to try to defer anything from happening that way.
All right. Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, do you have any other tips or tricks that you'd like to throw out there for anyone that might be listening that's a little concerned?
I wish I had a magic answer. There's no magic answer to security. There's just so much to do. There's so much going on. It's never ending. It's just going stronger and stronger. You just have to do what you can. Do everything we talked about: strong passwords, defense and depth, antivirus. Keep your operating system up to date and all your software patching up to date. That's another one where vulnerabilities lie. And another one tip I didn't mention earlier that I think would be great is, when possible, use 2 multi-factor authentication.
Okay.
And for if someone doesn't know what that is, that's the option that when you sign in there, they will also have to call or text you. So if someone had your password and signed in, for instance, if you had my password and signed in, I would get a text message saying, like, here's your code to enter. So you wouldn't get that code, so you wouldn't be able to enter it.
Okay.
So that's another layer of security.
Okay, I knew what that was, but I didn't know that it was actually called multi-factor authentication. Okay, good to know. All right, so if you want to be up to date on the latest local and national scams that are happening, you can visit Marquette's Fraud Protection Center on the website at marquettesavings.bank. Make sure you subscribe to the Your Money Counts podcast so you get the episodes when they are released. This podcast is brought to you by Marquette Savings Bank, an equal housing lender, member FDIC.